Welcome to the second episode of Completely Cricket. Hosting this episode today is myself, Avinash Ehathasan, and alongside me we have Ishan Madhok. Today we'll be talking about the shocking T20 World Cup semi-final results, who we think is going to win the World Cup, and our stat of the week. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, to start, let's talk about the England versus New Zealand semi-final. I think most people knew this was going to be a tight contest, but overall, I think, especially myself, I think England should have won because England were a very powerful team. And as we'll tell you guys later, there are some stats to prove how powerful England were. But in the end, New Zealand did win, and it was pretty surprising because England pretty much had the game, but in the end, it was just some poor bowling and New Zealand, amazing New Zealand power batting that just completely took the game away from England. Ishan, what do you think was the main deciding factor on who won towards the end?
Well, I think Daryl Mitchell, especially, put on a show at the end. And yeah, him and Devon Conway both batted really well, and that's what led to them winning. Also, some poor death bowling at the end, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think, especially, obviously, we know how good Chris Jordan has been for England over the last few years. However, considering the amount of experience he's had, you'd think that he'd be able to pull this off pretty comfortably. However, there was some questionable bowling. So Chris Jordan not really sticking to his strengths, I would say, his Yorkers. Obviously, we've seen in the T20 World Cup that just bowling Yorkers hasn't been effective. Slower balls have been pretty useful as well. But when you're in a semi-final, looking to go to a final, and being such a strong team like England, I think sticking to your strengths would be the best course of action. I think. Do you think Tymal Mills? Do you think England were missing Tymal Mills?
I don't think so. Actually, I think they should stick to their expertise and their experience. But he's an exciting player to look to. Yeah,
I think obviously it was very unfortunate he was injured, but even England could have probably played him because realistically in T20s over the past couple of years, you've had Jofra Archer death bowling, Chris Jordan, and then Tymal Mills is another option with his slower balls, and his execution of those slower balls is amazing. It's pretty much unseen. If you haven't got many people who bowl, especially in England, who bowl slower balls as well as Tymal Mills does. So the fact that he got injured and he was out for that match meant that England were weakened down, and no Jofra Archer as well meant that realistically Chris Jordan and Chris Woakes had to do the death bowling, with Chris Woakes mainly sticking to a back of the length or good length bowler. He's not really had much experience in death bowling, so I think it was a bit unfortunate for England, but still with the experience that Chris Jordan had and other players, you should have expected them to win. But that can't really be. We can't overshadow New Zealand's power batting. It was amazing. Jimmy Neesham, Daryl Mitchell, as you said, very, very good batsmen. So overall, I think most people expected England to win, but New Zealand did rightfully win in that match. They were the better team. Ishan, do you think there are any questions on England's batting performance? I think they scored roughly 166 or something like that.
Yeah, 166 for.
Do you think that was enough? Do you think it was a pass score? What do you think?
I think in order to beat New Zealand, they had to get 180 ideally. The top order kind of crumbled away. Joss Buttler and Donny Bairstow ideally would have got around 40 each. But good lower end batting from Moeen Ali and David Milan.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I think if you're going to play in a semi-final, there is no, realistically, unless you get 240, there is no amount that is too much, because the thing is that all these four teams in the semis are all very, very good teams. That's the reason why they're in the semis. So I think 180 plus is pretty ideal, because that gives you that platform. 9 runs and over means you need to be scoring probably 1 or 2 boundaries every over. And that puts pressure back on the batsmen. They need to be ticking at the run rate. They can't be going at 6 and over and then suddenly explode, because you need a lot of overs to suddenly explode. You can't be at the 18th over and needing 60 runs from the last 2. But 166 is only it's just above 8 runs and over. 8 runs and over is not hard to get. If you hit if you hit 4 or 5 singles and a couple of twos, something like that, you can still make 8 runs and over. So it's not enough of pressure on New Zealand. And England's bowlers they actually managed to keep New Zealand well under the run rate until the 16th over, where New Zealand needed 57 from 4 overs. So they managed to do it successfully, but it was just it was the death bowling that just completely took the game from England and gave it to New Zealand.
Back onto England's batting, I really think they could have gone a bit harder, because if you look at the back end of their batting, they have Billings, Woakes, Jordan, all these people can bat, and we've seen them score good runs in the past. So I think if they had gone harder, like at the top, they could have won, and they could have got a solid 180.
True. Okay, now let's go on to Australia versus Pakistan. This was another shocker, considering the favourites to win the tournament were probably England and Pakistan, and both of them got knocked out. It's a similar story to the England versus New Zealand, but it was more poor but death bowling. Also, obviously, very good batting from Matthew Wade towards the end. But do you think, Ishan, that Pakistan should have won that, or do you think it was deservedly Australia's win?
I think it was Australia's win, to be honest. Because let's just look at their batting. They can bat like very deep into their order, and some of their bowlers can bat, like Mitchell Starc, he can bat, Pat Cummins can bat, and that was proved at the end with Matthew Wade, Marcus Stoinis, all these people. The thing is, when you have someone like Aaron Finch getting out for a duck, it doesn't actually matter, because they have power hitting and down the back end. So that's why I think they deserved it. And also Pakistan, on the contrary, they don't really have batting after 3 or 4. So yeah. Yeah,
no, I pretty agree. I think Pakistan, their middle order hasn't been like strong enough. Like, obviously they're very lucky. They've got Babar Azam and Mohammad Rizwan at the top, who've been scoring hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of runs this year. They're 2 of the world's best T20 batsmen, I'd say, especially now. But you can't depend on 2 people forever. As we've seen in the England test team with Joe Root scoring loads of runs, if Joe Root suddenly doesn't score any runs, then the rest of the England team need to step up. So, and because the thing with form is that no one's in form forever. There's going to be periods of time where you're not going to be scoring. So that is true. And Australia, I think the thing with Australia is you could say, they're an pretty all-rounded team. They've got pace bowlers. They've got absolute pace from Mitchell Starc. You've got an amazing leg spinner, Adam Zampa. You've got Pat Cummins. You've got Josh Hazlewood. You've also got people like Marcus Stoinis who can bowl. They have everything covered, and I think they're a really good team. They were just unfortunate in the first couple of T20s not to have performed as good as they really could have. They could have pushed England a lot harder. I think something that's a bit surprising is Aaron Finch hasn't been really in form. Like, he hasn't been at his exploding best. Yet Australia is still into the finals. That's something to think of.
Yeah, I think that just proves my point again, because let's just say if Babar Azam or Mohammad Rizwan had got out like Aaron Finch, they wouldn't have got close to what they got. And that's their strength at the lower end. Yeah,
I agree. So I think that one as well was a shocker if you were to look at the score and say, okay, oh my God, Australia won. However, if you watch the match, you'd realise that Australia were the better team. They were pretty much a better team. There's also, I think there's been a question on Pakistan's fielding, like, especially for that semi-final. Generally, this tournament they fielded pretty well. There's like a stereotype that Pakistan haven't been very good fielders, which is partly justified. Some of their fielding has been questionable over tournaments over the last few years. However, this tournament they fielded pretty well, except for the semi-final match, a crucial match where Hassan Ali drops a catch. And what do you think of that, Ishan? Like, do you think that could have had a huge impact?
Yeah, any drop catches in cricket is usually bad, especially if it's off an important batsman. So I think that was quite influential. Yeah,
I think it's just shocking because Pakistan were so expected. Like, I expected Pakistan to win. Did you expect Pakistan to win before the match had started?
It's a good question. I was torn between the 2 teams because if if Babar Azam and Rizwan had done what they did to India, then I think they would have won. They'd both got high, but when they both got out, I kind of knew that Australia was going to win.
Yeah, that is true.
It was just a battle of who could hit harder, because either team weren't going to get bowled out because they have really strong batting. Just who could hit harder. And it turns out it was Australia.
That's true. Okay,
also,
then. Oh yeah, sorry. You tell me.
An interesting point to add is most teams who have bowled first have won, and yeah, that seemed to happen here.
That's true. We'll also come on to that a little bit next. So next, what we're going to go on to is who we think is going to win the World Cup. Before we tell our individual what we think are predictions, let's talk about important factors for the final. Ishan, what do you think? Any important factors that you think will play a big deal in the final?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the toss, and it's going to depend on whether New Zealand gets started and people like Daryl Mitchell start scoring, because they don't have as much depth as Australia, and they need their top players to play well. Yeah, we can't be seeing like people like Martin Guptill and Kane Williamson getting out early.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, in terms of toss, as Ishan mentioned before, it's very interesting that in 12 matches in Dubai International Stadium, where the final's happening, the team bowling first has won 11 out of the 12. That's ridiculous. It's pretty, like, these things like this don't really happen very often. It's generally more even. Obviously, might lean to one side, so bowling first or batting first might win. But this is 11 out of 12 matches that the team bowling first has won. So there's a really big onus on winning the toss and then bowling first, because even then that just gives you that boost, because you've known that most teams bowling first have won. So
yeah, it's the dew in that pitch that's really, it's slowing down the ball and restricting the score of the batting side. And that's the bowling side such a big favour.
Yeah, I think spin is going to be key, because as you saw with Shadab in Pakistan versus Australia, spin is really, really important in this World Cup. And with Australia, you have Adam Zampa, who's bowled really, really well, very consistently, and he's always been threatening the stumps as well as threatening the batsmen. He's not been giving them any loose deliveries, so I think spin and Adam Zampa will be very key. Any New Zealand spinners you think will be key?
Let's see.
Maybe Mitchell Santner. I think he might be key. Left arm off spinner.
Yeah. He could be, but I don't think he's that powerful of a spinner like Adam Zampa. Like, I don't think he can take wickets like that. But he doesn't seem to be as potent of a bowler. He's more economical. But we'll see. We'll see what happens in the
Okay, so let's go on to individual predictions. I'll start with mine, then Ishan, you tell yours. So I think that New Zealand going to win, and I think it's going to be tight, but New Zealand going to win. Who do you think, Ishan?
I agree with you. I think it's going to be very tight, but I think Australia will prevail for two primary reasons. As you mentioned, Adam Zampa has been bowling really well. Against Pakistan, he had an economy of 5.5, I believe, and he got a wicket as well. And also their pace, Mitchell Starc, Josh Hazlewood, he didn't play so well, but I'm sure he will, and Pat Cummins. So their batting is super strong. They go down to number 11. You are right. See, when you put Australian players on a list, you can see there are loads of big names. However, I'm convinced that with New Zealand, Daryl Mitchell, Kane Williamson, Martin Guptill 100% has to fire. Like, everyone knows how strong of a batsman Martin Guptill is after how he batted in the 2015 World Cup as an example of his power batting. But we haven't seen much from him. We've seen a little bit
But if he can score a good explosive 50 off 25, for example, 50 off 30, I think that'll be a big confidence boost for Australia and gives a platform for the middle order batsmen to explode and continue. So in terms of how both teams have performed recently, I think New Zealand have the edge. In a T20 series between Australia and New Zealand earlier this year, New Zealand won 3-2. New Zealand have been very consistent in terms of bowling wise as well. Then bowling economy is lower than Australia's. But there are positives to Australia, aren't there, Ishan?
Yeah. If you just look at Australia's team, look at the experience they have. Warner, experienced, played a lot, really good player. Finch is a great T20 player, but hasn't played so well. Steve Smith, of course. Glenn Maxwell in the IPL has shown how good he is. Marcus Stoinis has also shown with the slow balls and can also hit hard. And just I think Australia, with their experience there, they're going to be much better off in the finals compared to New Zealand, who they have a few good players, but a lot of their players are young, and Martin Guptill and Kane Williamson haven't been playing so well, and I think if they don't play well, they're not gonna end up converting it into a win.
Yeah, that's true. I think there is in terms of both teams. So in Australia, you've got the question of, I think the two people who will be under pressure will be Aaron Finch and I think Mitchell Starc, because Mitchell Starc he's been very expensive recently in this World Cup. Obviously, Aaron Finch, we know, hasn't really scored very much. He did score a 40 or 44 against England, but that wasn't a good enough tempo anyway. 40 or 44 in a World Cup final, for example, wouldn't be enough because you need to be going at a very high run rate. New Zealand's questionable players, I think Ishan, you already mentioned it, is Martin Guptill and Kane Williamson. Two top order batsmen. It isn't the best signs that both of them aren't really firing that much, because obviously they're expected to score the runs. But with Kane Williamson, everyone knows how good of a batsman he is. He can easily come in today and in the final and score a 50 off 30, 35 balls. He's like an anchor for the team, so everyone else can just work around him. He keeps at the strike. He keeps doesn't get out and stays in till the end of the match, whereas everyone else will play more cameos. So we don't know. I think it's really tight. Like that, Australia probably have the bigger names, but New Zealand has shown how good their bowling is and how good their batting is as well. So it could go either way. I think it could go either way.
I think Kane Williamson is gonna become similar to Shane Watson, who plays well in the finals, because all that experience of Kane Williamson, it might just be shown here in the finals, and he could score he could get a lot of runs.
Yeah, that's true. Our final section for today is a new section called Stat of the Week. Basically, it's just an interesting statistic about some cricket that's gone over in the last week or two. So for today, we have a statistic that shows the top four teams, so the teams that qualify for the semis, England, Australia, Pakistan, New Zealand, and the amount of balls per boundary that they scored in this tournament so far. So leading the way, as one might expect, is England with 5.87 balls per boundary. Then you've got Australia, 5.91 balls per boundary. Then Pakistan, 6.22 balls per boundary. New Zealand, 7.32 balls per boundary. You might be thinking, what's so interesting about this? Ishan, can you explain what's really interesting?
Well, it just shows really the strength of the batsmen and how good they are at hitting. And in a team like New Zealand's more passive, so that's why we see their balls per boundary at 7.32. And a team like England's very aggressive. But this is going to play up in the finals as we see Australia versus New Zealand. And this is what I think that is going to be the deciding factor between the two of them, because they both have strong teams and they're both unlikely to be bowled out. So I believe a team with a higher balls per boundary ratio is going to be better.
Yeah, that's really well put. I think that pretty much sums it up, because realistically, if they're not going to be bowled out, then it really matters on the more boundaries you get in an over, the more runs you're eventually going to get. And if Australia can get at least one boundary in an over, so 1 in 6 roughly, New Zealand getting 1 in 7.3, I think that's a pretty substantial difference. I think obviously this is just a summary of this is an average of the tournament. We've seen New Zealand be a lot more explosive, especially towards the back end, but there's gonna be some questions on whether New Zealand have enough firepower to win the T20 World Cup. So yeah, I think, and the really surprising thing is England leading the way at 5.87 balls per boundary. Why? Like, it's really surprising they haven't qualified. They've scored loads. That might be the reason why their balls per boundary might be really high, is due to like their smashing wins over like Australia, for example, where they beat Australia with 50 balls to spare. But still, overall, you've seen England as a team have scored loads of runs and had a lot of firepower, and it's really surprising they didn't qualify. It is really shocking.
Yeah, that is shocking. Again, I think it's due to experience. You know, their main players, their experienced players, haven't played so well. Josh Butler, Johnny Bairstow, you know, these people, they haven't played so well, and I think that's a big factor. Also, I think Owen Morgan should have come in earlier, because we've seen how well he can hit when he got those 18 sixes, I believe.
Yeah, no, that's actually true. I didn't think of that. I was just that's actually really important in terms of batting. Who the order, the decisions made could have been obviously on the time. Owen Morgan would have made whatever decision he felt was right. I also think Liam Livingston. I think he came in at 5. I think something like 5. I actually might have taken a risk, and if we saw the batsman struggling towards the start, I might have actually taken a risk and put Liam Livingston up, because he's opened before for Lancashire. He's batted. He can bat up top order. He's shown his quality. I think if you really want to kick on, I think you should put Liam Livingston up top, because then he shows it takes a few balls to get in. Maybe if he has that time, he's given the time. Obviously, if he comes in at like 5, 6, 7, for example, towards the back end of the innings, he's given no time to get in. He just has to hit it as hard as he can. Whereas if you put him up top, give him a little bit of time, and that means he'll score bigger runs realistically, because he's more comfortable in the crease.
Yeah, I agree. He's given more of an opportunity to get settled and play his game. Yeah, I agree with you actually.
Yeah,
should probably come in earlier. Some like Mo and Ali played really well as well. I think that was a good idea to keep him up there. But
yeah. Okay then. I think that's pretty much it for this week. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Ishan, and we'll see you on the next one.